And so my rear suspension adventure starts. Yes, it's a Daihatsu Mira Avanzato TRXS R4. Project Mirabel. What I showed in the last video was me taking out one of the rear springs and doing some measurements. What I presumed what was going on was that maybe lowering springs or something like that had been fitted, because there's almost no movement in the rear suspension. Watch this. I'm going to push this down as hard as I can. Basically it's riding on the bump stops from what I can make out. So the first place I started was to try and source some springs, and from a lot of searching online I came across these suplex ones. You could also get KYB with the same dimensions, but they weren't available, weren't in stock. So these springs are basically the exact same diameter and height and number of coils as what's in here. The only difference is that the actual thickness of the coil is thicker. So my theory on this was that perhaps the gauge of the coil that's on there, I don't know if they're standard or not, is just being compressed down because the gauge is too thin, and by putting in a thicker gauge coil that it'll raise the suspension up and actually give a bit of travel. So I'm not really sure about this. I just ordered them. I got these from Germany, and I'm going to throw one in and see what it looks like. The current ride height to the top of the arch is just under 59 centimeters on the center line. But I already know this probably isn't going to work. I was in touch with one of the previous sellers of this car, and he mentioned that the rear shocks were replaced with shocks from rear shocks from a Corsa, from an Opel Corsa or a Vauxhall Corsa. And really that's a heavier car, and it wouldn't suit a car as light as this. And I don't know if the travel and everything like that matched to a Mira. So it's probably the shocks that are at fault, and the springs that are in here are likely correct for the car. It's just that the shocks or the dampers are incorrect. So I searched all over and I could not find them anywhere locally or in Europe or anywhere like that. And the best I could do was to order KYB rear shocks from Japan. So they will obviously take a long time to come and quite expensive. But in the meantime, I'm just curious to put this in and just see if it does anything at all, or if the ride height is going to be the same. So might as well give it a go. Here is the old spring compared to the new one. It's probably hard to see on camera, but the diameter is slightly larger on the new one of the gauge of the wire. So it should fit straight in. Quick to check anyway, so might as well. Well, that is interesting. It's raised it up about 2 centimeters. There's a bit more clearance there. It's closer to what's on the front. Doesn't seem to be any more compliant. So I'm not sure that that's made any difference whatsoever. I think the sensible thing to do here is to wait for the KYB shocks to come in and pair them with these lighter gauge ones. And I'm fairly sure the damper, the stroke of the damper, is the overall length of it is probably just not right for this, and then the travel doesn't suit this light car. So to be continued. So I've got a package here from Japan for Mirabel. Sometimes when I get in parts from Japan, I use a site called Bai, and they charge basically a redirecting fee. You can buy it from, say, Yahoo auctions and have it shipped to them, and they will ship it on to you. And it's worked for me in the past, but there's certain items that you cannot buy through Bai, and one of those items is suspension. Even springs, I seem to have issues with previously, but especially dampers. It's something to do with the compressed gas or oil or whatever it is. So you're going to have to find another solution. A guy that I've used a couple of times is called Jesse Streeter. and he does a very similar kind of service where you tell him what item you want to buy from Yahoo Auctions or from any third-party shop or whatever. He'll order the parts and get them shipped to his place and then ship them on to you. Excellent service. I got this super quick. From the time I ordered it to the time it was at my door was probably less than a week. He used DHL because they are the only company that will ship suspension parts for some reason. And Bai don't use DHL, so that's part of the reason they can't help you with that. Anyway, let's see what's inside. Here's a familiar logo. That's interesting. It's showing you how to dispose of your old shocks by getting the oil out and disposing of the oil, and then the installation process. So it comes with some new bushes. Very cool. And the shock itself. I'm glad I'm seeing this threaded end on here, because a lot of the shocks I was looking online that were meant to be suitable for the Mira had this type of bush on both ends, which I knew wasn't correct. So this looks like it should do the job nicely. So here's where the problem lies. These are the two shocks side by side. As you can see, the total length of this is quite a bit longer. This bit up here, I'm not sure if it makes any difference or not, is shorter up here. These coarser ones appear to have been modified because there is some instructions here on the side saying 2mm drill body. So I'm not exactly sure what they had done to that. It does appear a little bit wet here as well, so it may have been leaking. All of the bushes are completely different as well, so it was definitely not ideal. So I have to figure out now which way this goes on. I'm pretty sure this is the right way. This goes on the underside side and this goes on the boot side. Okay, and the new dampers are now in. The moment of truth. It's back on the ground. Ride height has been raised up to a similar level as the front, so looking promising. What does it feel like? Oh yes, like there's actually dampers in there and I'm not just hitting the bump stop straight away. That's a very good sign. Obviously I'll have to take it out on a test drive to be sure that it's actually working correctly, but it is looking promising. I'm just going to take it down a particularly rough piece of road here to make sure that I'm happy with the rear suspension. Very happy with that.